I've talked about this extensively, right? The war in the Middle East, what went down, right? So let's go ahead and kind of go through it real fast, right? So go back in time. October 7th went down, right? Hamas invaded Israel. First it was reported 2,000 people, Israelis were killed, then it ended up being 1,200, and then there's a bunch of controversy and everything else like that on how many Israelis were killed by IDF, etc. But the point is that Hamas invaded, right? This led to a all-out war on Hamas by Israel. They went into Gaza, and to this day, right, they've been bombing them crazy, right? We have a bunch of civilian casualties. They've killed roughly, some estimates are as low as 20,000 all the way up to 100,000 plus innocent people have been killed in Gaza, right? It's a very densely populated area in Israel. And I'll go ahead and show you guys it on a map real fast because I understand that many of you might not be familiar with the Middle East like that. Right? So, let me bring this right here for you ninjas. Now, I've covered this war extensively, but here's the Gaza Strip right here, right? So here's Israel, right? Grand scheme of things, bird's eye view. Here's Israel. Oh, let me move my mug out the way. My bad. Here's Israel right here. Then you got the Gaza Strip down here, right, chat? So this is where Israel invaded, and they've been bombing crazy. They worked their way all the way down to Rafah, and pretty much Israel now controls Gaza, right? During the course of their military campaign, they killed two notable individuals from Hamas. They killed a guy named Yahya Sinwar, right? This guy, he was the head of the military wing. They killed him. And they also killed Ismail Haniyeh, right? Who was the head of the political wing of Hamas. He was the chief negotiator for the hostages. Now, the way they killed Ismail Haniyeh, so they killed Sinwar right here in Rafah, right? And they did it kind of by accident. They didn't know it was him. He was actually on the front lines fighting with his guys, and he got killed. He threw a stick at the drone, and then they popped him right before. Then Haniyeh was killed right here in Tehran, Iran, when he was going to a presidential inauguration, because one of the presidents of Iran was killed in a helicopter crash, which, by the way, I think people suspect that IDF tampered with his helicopter and killed him as well. But the point is that Iran is the chief enemy of Israel, and Israel was able to kill one of their opponents in Iran's capital. Crazy, right? Or one of their major cities. And the reality is it's Israel and Iran that have the biggest beef, and then you have these countries like Iraq and how do I make this bigger? All right, there we go. Boom, that's better. So you have Iran right here, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, right, and then you have Yemen right here. These countries make up what's called the axis of resistance, right? Iran is the leader of the axis of resistance. They dislike Israel, sworn enemies, right? So Israel killing Ismail Haniyeh, this guy, in Tehran, Iran, is incredibly embarrassing and bad. Imagine your best friend is at your house, right? And your ops break in and fucking kill him in your house, right? Obviously, this created a lot of tension, a lot of problems. The IRGC was, suspected of having some dirty moles, all this crap, right? So that was what Israel was able to do with their intelligence agencies. They literally assassinated him while he was in one of his favorite bunkers that he stays in whenever he's in Iran. Then on top of that, Israel launched a intelligence campaign where they blew up a bunch of pagers in Lebanon, okay? In Beirut, a bunch of phones, beepers, walkie-talkies, pagers, a bunch of like these old school communication devices all blew up simultaneously, right? And as that was happening, they were also launching a ground assault into southern Lebanon, right? Now, Israel got their ass kicked in the ground assault, right? Kind of like they did in 2006. They couldn't really push as far as they wanted. They were trying to get to the Litani River. They couldn't make it. They tried to make it to Beirut. They couldn't do it. But they killed Hassan Nasrallah by bombing the fuck out of Beirut. And they killed Fuad Shakur, right? And Hassan Nasrallah, just so you guys know, put a face and name real quick. This guy was the head of Hezbollah, right, who's based out of Lebanon. They killed him in an airstrike. So they killed two of the top Hamas guys, and they killed the top guy for Hezbollah, right? And they also launched this pager attack. Mind you, guys, these pagers, I got to give Israel credit for this. They had these bombs and these pagers for damn near 10 years, guys. Imagine you bought some pagers and walkie-talkies, right? Because you're doing everything in your power to not be intercepted by intelligence agencies from the West and from Israel. And all of a sudden they all blow up and kill a bunch of your people or seriously maim or injure them, right? That's like a lot of psychological warfare there, right? People were terrified. Some of these guys didn't even want to turn their air conditioners on the next day, right? That's how scared they were. Because they had these things dormant for 10 years, bro. 10 years. And then they went ahead and let them off again a day later. More of them went off and killed people, right? So then, right, Israel went into southern Lebanon, had a ground assault. Like I said, they couldn't push as much as they wanted, but they had done the damage. They took down a lot of the missiles and rockets that they were using to launch into Israel, because just so you guys know, this whole area of northern Israel, Netanyahu had to evacuate like 50,000 Israelis out of this area. Why? Because Lebanon was shooting missiles constantly into Israel, right? And the reason why they did this strategically was to assist, because Israel had their hands full with the Gaza Strip. So by launching missiles into Israel every day after October 7th, right, that would force the IDF to kind of divert their resources. So they had to put a good amount of people on the border here in the north, as well as launch a fight down here. Then on top of that, they're also fighting with the Houthis down here in Yemen, who are also launching missiles at Israel at all times, right? So the strategy from the Axis of Resistance was to try to strain the resources of the IDF. Israel's a small country, guys. It's maybe the size of New Jersey, right? So Hezbollah is firing these missiles. So Israel went in and did the ground assault. They did the pager campaign. Then they went into did the ground assault. They took down a lot of these rockets that they were shooting from southern Lebanon, right? And then eventually a ceasefire was brokered. After the ceasefire was brokered, a war went down in Syria, right? Over here in Syria, you have multiple different fronts that have different interests. I won't go into the whole thing of it because the Syria civil war, it could be a video in itself. It's extremely complex. We're talking about 4 to 5 different factions fighting each other. But what you guys need to know for the purposes of summarizing this is there were rebel groups out here in the Idlib area, right? This is not run by Bashar al-Assad, this area, right? These rebel groups, realizing that Hezbollah had been weakened, right, because they give a lot of assistance to Syria, and also knowing that Russia has a fight with Ukraine, as we discussed before, these two military groups have been significantly involved in Bashar al-Assad maintaining power in Syria. Well, obviously, he took power, and this all occurred after the Arab Spring in the early 2010s, 2011s, whatever. But the point is that with the ceasefire that was brokered in between Israel and Lebanon, that significantly weakened Hezbollah, and Russia could not give the aid that they wanted. So they pounced on the opportunity and they launched an attack into Aleppo. Once they got into Aleppo and they took Aleppo, they took the M5 highway and started going straight for Damascus, right? Bashar al-Assad had to flee. He fled. He's now protected in Russia under asylum. But now the rebels and this guy, Jolani, this guy, which is funny how they rebranded him, former Al-Qaeda, by the way, FYI, this guy, right? He is now the de facto leader of Syria now. He has taken power. And Assad is in Russia hiding. But it's also important to note that when this was all going down, chat, Israel bombed the fuck out of and destroyed all of Syria's military installments. Missile defense systems, bases, weapon caches, etc. They destroyed their navy, they destroyed their ships, they destroyed their planes, everything, right? So now Syria and these rebels effectively cannot attack Israel, right? And this guy Jelani actually said himself that he doesn't want to fight with Israel, right? Because Assad is very unpopular in Syria. A lot of people dislike him. So, as you guys can see, and again, like I told you, this is a very complex war because we're talking about multiple countries, multiple geopolitical situations going on here in the Middle East, etc. But what you guys need to know is right now, I would say Israel has effectively won this conflict. And they've won this conflict because they've been able to destabilize almost every one of their adversaries since October 7th. They destroyed Hamas. The Gaza Strip is pretty much all rubble. They've hindered Hezbollah and killed off all their top leadership. They've destabilized Bashar al-Assad, who was responsible for weapons being moved from Iran, right, into Lebanon. Iraq, we already know, has been destabilized ever since 2003. And quite effectively, the last stronghold left is Iran. Iran is the last one standing now, right? So all of its proxies have been pretty disabled. And then down in in Yemen, Israel has been bombing the Houthis. They bombed their airport recently, a couple days ago. So the Houthis are also getting hit. Now, Israel has been able to basically either A, destabilize, or B, neuter all of their adversaries, right? They destabilized Sudan, right, with the civil war. They made peace with Egypt because Egypt has a deal with Israel and the United States where we pay a lot of their debts as long as they play nice with Israel. They are partners with Jordan. They also have a deal with Jordan where they're an ally. Obviously, we talked about how they destabilized the axis of resistance, right? Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, they don't have beef with Israel. They've pretty much recognized them. Libya, destabilized. They got rid of Gaddafi. Morocco, pretty much made peace with them. Algeria, made peace to a degree. Tunisia. So all of the Middle East pretty much is either destabilized or forced to recognize and or make peace with Israel because of American influence and pressure. So 2025, we'll see what happens, but Iran is the last stronghold left that has issues with Israel. So 2025, we'll see what happens. Trump did say on the PBD podcast that he wasn't interested in regime change in Iran. We all know that regime change is extremely expensive and not necessarily to the benefit of America. We learned our lesson after Iraq, right? When we went there for weapons of mass destruction, which were never fucking there. So we'll see what happens. But give me ones in the chat if that makes sense, guys. But that was a very summarized version of events, of what went down in the Middle East. Give me ones if that all makes sense, chat.